So, Craig, awesome to be talking to you.
Yeah, good to be here, Rich. It's been 10 years since we started this company inside of Google Ventures. Nice to catch up again as we have been over the last 10 years.
Yeah, so you're one of the few companies that we sort of kind of quasi incubated. What was that like?
Yeah, it wasn't just quasi incubated, it was affirmatively incubated. So I left Google Voice, probably around June of 2010 and moved over to Google Ventures as an EIR and lived in your offices and got to work with your design team and the other Google Ventures partners and really kind of figure out what we wanted to do as we started this company. So GV was fantastic for that.
It had to do with restaurant reservations, if I recall, didn't it?
Yeah. What was it? The iPad had just come out recently, and we felt that the restaurant industry posed a huge opportunity for being modernized due to mobile technologies. And if you look, fast forward, look at what Toast and what Square have done, it was correct. That being said, our chops and our Dialpad experience was much more on the telephony side. So we wisely pivoted and started focusing on business communications.
We should go back in history a little bit. You started off saying, right, you left Google Voice, right? So Google Voice came out of your second startup?
So go to the late 1990s, I was with a venture fund, and we invested in a company called Dialpad in 1999, and that was a consumer voice over IP company that allowed you to make cheap phone calls to anywhere in the world using the internet. And it was really kind of like mind-blowing that you could actually bypass all the carriers and be able to drive 99% of the cost out of a call just by using the internet versus a phone system. And so then in 2001, when the world kind of melted down and the internet bubble burst, they put me in there to run it for what was supposed to be a couple months and turn into a 3-year journey or a 4-year journey, turn it profitable, building it back up. And then we got acquired by Yahoo. And so then left Yahoo, started a company called Grand Central that was all about putting you in control of all your communications and basically making each individual their own personal little phone company, basically. And that got acquired by Google and became Google Voice.
You mentioned a few startups. So Grand Central is the company that Google acquired. You were already doing IP-based voice at scale. And then, of course, within Google, you learned how to do that at scale on steroids.
Yeah. We literally spent the first 18 months after being acquired of rebuilding all of our internals to be able to support Google scale. And it paid a ton of dividends down the road, but it took obviously quite a while to rebuild everything you had built in this kind of like, monolithic fashion, and then rebuild it in the Google microservices way, and really leveraging the Google Cloud, which at the time was not a publicly available thing, was an internal thing. And at the same time, leveraging our expertise in interoperating with carriers around the world. And we came up with this thing that was called split cloud architecture, where you end up with all the brains in Google and all the decisions and all the security and scale and routing and reliability and all that stuff. But then the media itself would actually talk to the carriers down on what we called internally at Google, these Periscope jail systems that were actually not in the cloud, but actually down in real data centers. And so when we launched Google Voice, we grew that up to over 20 million users using Google Voice phone numbers and phones, and that was just a massive scale for voice over IP for internet telephony, where everything was really interoperating with the telephony. So when we redid Dialpad, or when we left Google to build Dialpad, those things we had built internally were now externally available. It's like the Google Cloud then existed. WebRTC was made open source, and all those pieces we had spent time perfecting internally, we got to use externally.
You didn't initially say, let's build the idealized enterprise phone system full on. It was, let's look at it. So we started with Firestarter as a startup idea. Probably a good idea, wrong people to be working on it. We know telephony. What's a big pain point in telephony? And it was super simple at scale conferencing, right? So that was Uber
Yeah.
Conference was that first pivot from Firestarter to something in the telecom space back to your roots.
That's right. The very first, and it was everything we were going to build in business voice was all going to use this same platform. But the first easiest product to launch was a better audio conferencing product. And that was Uber Conference circa 2012. We launched it at TechCrunch Disrupt. We won Disrupt with it. And it really was, hey, like it's 2012. Why, when I join a conference call, do I have to enter a code and hear a beep and say my name and not know who's on the call? That was kind of crazy to me. And that's how it had been for the prior 30 years. So we came up with a way where you just dial a number, you're automatically joined. We can give you a URL to see who's on the call and to let you control muting and recording and things like that. Which was actually pretty innovative in 2012. And then obviously over time, we were like, okay, conferencing's one piece. Conferencing's the easiest to launch because you don't have to sell it to, the IT head. Individual users can just sign up and kind of start using it, and you can start infecting companies with more and more people using it, and then you can go sell the IT leader. So that was the first one. But then we went on to do business phone systems and then contact center and then adding artificial intelligence across all that.
I was the guy always driving down the road with my mobile phone, joining a conference call, having to drive and go back to my calendar, look at a PIN number, try and dial it, like what is going on? And so it was crazy simple. And I wasn't the only one who thought that, right? So you had your funding for Uber Conference, it was doing great. And it really, you had to build out the whole telecom platform to do that. You had to do the carrier connect, you had to have the multi-session at scale stuff. And then when you started to realize, well, who's using this product? It's all these enterprises. And for me, the elevator pitch was really like enterprises had moved pretty much every piece of equipment to the cloud. And yet there was still this one closet, right? That you opened it up that had this big antiquated PBX or key system, that it was still being sold with this list of features that no one ever used, with these big phones with buttons that no one ever used, right? So it just seemed like a natural, quote, elevator pitch to be able to say, look, that's that piece of equipment, like, Mr. IT, CIO, whatever, like, let's move it.
And when we first launched the phone system piece, we call it Dialpad Talk. But when we launched that, immediately we won a contract from Motorola for their worldwide telephony. And like immediately you saw the value that it gave to a large distributed worldwide enterprise. All of a sudden, so they prior to Dialpad, they had something like 7 different phone system providers for all their different offices around the world. In each location, they're in over 20 countries, they had to get their own SIP trunks or PRIs to connect from the local phone company to connect to that different phone system. I took a picture of that room inside of Motorola, and it's crazy. It's this massive room with 10,000 little blue wires, each one going to a little punch board, in this phone thing. And if you hire someone new, you got to pull a new wire, or if that guy moves to the other side of the building, you literally have to physically move the wire. And it's not like you going in there and doing it easily. You call, like International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers to come out and move that wire. And it's a couple $100 just to do that. And so our pitch to them was, look, you have to provide this internal network regardless. Like that should be your focus. You need it for email, you need it for accounting, you need it for all the other tools you're using in the cloud. Let's just use that for the phone system as well. And then you can shut that closet and you'll never need it again, because they're just IP endpoints and they connect to the cloud, and it could be in the headquarters or it could be at your house. No one really cares.
I think product and engineering has kind of cooked since day one. Sales and marketing has been a little bit more of an uphill struggle from people, focus. What's your lessons learned from that?
Yeah, lessons learned there is a lot of it is you have so many options when you go into market. Do you go SMB? Do you go mid-market? Do you go after enterprise? Do you build out a channel program? what is basically the strategy? And I think what we've learned is it's really hard to do everything great simultaneously. That said, it's also a little bit of timing of when the market is ready to make that migration. So what we found is, like in trying to sell, and you don't really realize it when you're coming out of Google, we're used to everything, of course the cloud's going to win. And of course the mobile apps make sense. And, we had really, really good successes with companies like Twitter and Splunk and Uber and WeWork and Domo and all these modern thinking, high growth companies. They totally understood that natively. But when we try to build out a big sales force and aim them at legacy buyers who, someone running an insurance company in Baton Rouge, like maybe they don't see the world exactly in the same way that startups in the Silicon Valley do, right? And the value of being able to be productive from anywhere, they really didn't care. They just wanted a more modern version of the phone system that they had.
I've seen a lot of startups struggle with this, that point of, wait, we got Motorola really easy, probably too easy, right? To convince us, really big multinational enterprises are ready for this. And there's definitely setting up gates and metrics to say, wait, are we really ready to go at scale with that enterprise and go from the kind of company size that really is our repeat sales to something that was honestly almost, 100x that in size that we all of a sudden thought we were going to be able to build. And it just turned out that the data we were basing that decision on saying we're ready, we weren't quite there yet. And that can be costly. I see a lot of startups make that mistake.
Traditionally, you start SMB, you add more features, you get more awareness, get more credibility as a startup, and you start getting bigger and bigger accounts. You go to mid-market, get more credibility, you start adding more features, you go up market and you go enterprise. Kind of like this, this progression from left to right. And you're right, like day one, we land, a Fortune 500 enterprise with worldwide offices that was really happy with the service. And it makes you think, okay, great, let's just keep doing that. That was awesome. I love the multi-million-dollar contracts. They're not nearly as plentiful or easy, and there's a whole lot, as you learn the entire sales motion in a large enterprise, there's a lot of things beyond just providing the best product that can derail you. And so, if I had to do it over again, I think we would have been a little more disciplined and focused on mid-market earlier and longer, and then really started branching out into enterprise once you had the complete, product suite ready for it, which for anyone listening, we are more than ready now, but this was early days, 2015. And it does, as a startup guy, it does, strain your metrics because enterprise sales forces are expensive and the motions are slow and long. And you put a whole team in place and you won't know until a year from now whether they're going to be successful or not. And that's a lot of investment to find out. So it's a really interesting and challenging decision of when do you really go for it and when do you think you're ready and when do you lean in?
Yeah, the nugget of wisdom I like is Seth Pribach from Level Up. His metric was, and what he always held his sales team to, I don't want to see anybody selling to anything that is 2x the size of a sale that we've already completed. And they did grow that up, and it can, you can grow pretty quickly at that because there's a geometric growth there, but it also keeps you kind of focused on controlled growth and not overstretching the systems that the company has in place, but still allowing you to have enough headroom.
I think that's actually a great metric that everyone running a B2B SaaS startup should take to heart.
Let's talk about being able to be and have the luxury to be at the right place at the right time. So COVID, devastating, right? Completely has transformed how people think about the workplace. But as this is hitting, you're sitting on a communications platform that's designed to help people seamlessly handle their corporate communications, no matter where, when, and how they are. So how has that, how have you been able to basically leverage this crisis for the benefit of the company?
Again, more than anything, we knew ultimately our pitch from day one of building Uber Conference and building this platform was, like the work is not a thing you do, or it's not a place you go. It's a thing you do. And you're doing it from anywhere, and you're doing it all the time. And you're doing it on your mobile phone. You're doing it on your laptop. And so we were always built for this reality of, location doesn't matter, right? Like the amount of work, and even pre-COVID, the amount of work, like the amount of remote work that was happening continued to increase year over year. And it was just a little, not as steep of a curve, but the benefits were great. And so when COVID hit, first thing first, we had a flood of SMBs coming to us. So SMBs could move as fast as possible, right? So immediately they came and signed up online, and we had a lot of SMB volume. Then our existing mid-market and enterprise businesses deployed more. Where they were doing, kind of a phased rollout, they're like, okay, we need to get this to everyone immediately. So that really helped on expansion. And then we saw, and now we're seeing, just every company on the planet effectively needs a solution like this. Like legitimately, this hit every business in the world at exactly the same time. Like events like that never happened. So it really did like focus on, okay, how do we simplify the messaging? How do we reach more people? How do we improve our channel program? Because the channel, although you give them some economics, they have armies of people who are out on the street and know where every active deal is. And so we've really invested in that. And it was more than anything, just getting the word out and really, really letting our customers or potential customers know that we are the single company that has been built for this reality since day one, and really driving that message home. And then again, showing some unique stuff around real-time AI, which actually becomes even more important. The strengths we had of easy onboarding, easy deployment, coaching the person on the call, that's even more important when they're at their home and don't have an IT or a manager over their shoulder. It becomes even more important. So that's where Dialpad really benefited from this. But again, we're still in the very early innings of this. Like there's still, this is like they say there's 400 million desk phones spread around the world in businesses, and only about 10 million of those have moved to the cloud so far. So the next 390 million are going to be coming over the next couple of years, and that's what's super exciting about being in the spot.
You founded multiple companies, right? Big acquisition by Google. What was harder? What's been harder than you expected it to be? This time around, your third startup.
Yeah, it's funny. So the first one was, I came in 2001 to 2005. That was a super challenging time, and so that was a grind of just every day was life and death. And like I was our general counsel, I was our CFO, I was our CEO. Like we didn't have a lot of excess. And then the second one was we did a Series A. 18 months later, we got bought by Google. We never had a cloudy day. Everything just worked right. It was kind of like payback for the pain of the first one. And then this one has been a 10-year journey of just incrementally adding and adding and adding and adding and adding. And I remember when we did do our Series B financing, Mark Anderson was concerned that I was going to sell the company too quickly because we had sold our prior two. And now 10 years later, it's like, okay, I've proven that I didn't do that. But I'd say that it's funny when you look back over the last 10 years, and if you take a step back, it all looks kind of like high to the right? Like every round of financing was up, revenues just continued up to the right, everything's up to the right. But if you zoom in, like there's like a million gyrations of like little ups and downs entirely along the way. And I guess, I've never run a company. This is the longest I've had a job, the same job in my life, 10 years of a single job. And the various evolutions that occur over the course of a startup's life, and all these things that are kind of like almost life and death decisions that somehow or another you pick the right door and you continue to, the journey gets to continue. It's really been interesting. And it's like, like, I don't know, chance favors the bold, or like the harder I work, the luckier I get, all these acronym or little sayings, but they do prove to be pretty true. Like, it seems like things generally work out as long as you kind of keep your eye on the long-term prize and keep doing the right things on a day-to-day basis.